विज्ञान की अनकही कहानियाँ। आइए हम सुने विज्ञान की अनसुनी कहानियाँ। Hello listeners, you're listening to Vigyan Ki Awaaz podcast program on STEM popularization, catalyzed and supported by the Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India and Media for Community Foundation. Project devised and designed by Dr. R. Sridhar and assisted by Ashish Tiwari. Local coordination and production, Professor Subramanian. Content writing by Priyanshu and post-production by Professor Kaushik P. Kanchan of Garden City University, Bengaluru. Garden City University, conquer we shall all adversity. Together we stand in unity. Together we strive for prosperity. GCU, emphasis on life. GCU, emphasis on life. In the last episode, Dr. shared his journey of how he transitioned from mechanical engineering to computational physics and then to entrepreneurship. And in this episode, he talks about what is his future goals for his research and the startup in the next 10 to 20 years, especially by 2047.
Right, so we actually, the reason for creating the 3 stages was also incremental stages. The first stage essentially works with computer simulations and design. The second stage works with a prototype device. The prototype device shows our capability, demonstrates our capability of developing all the subsidiary technologies required to control a nuclear fusion reaction. And we're working on magnetically confined fusion, in which you have big magnets that control the plasma, which is the fusion fuel, and create the conditions which are required for fusion to happen. Now the third step is essentially getting to a small power plant, small reactor. Now this small reactor is as small that it can fit in the back of a truck. That is our vision, to be able to get to 50 megawatt electric. These 50 megawatt electrics could be transportable fusion reactors which can move from one place to another, serving purposes where we have India being a very difficult terrain, we have very remote areas. All of these remote areas need to be powered by sources outside of coal, and that's what we want to answer. A lot of space technology missions will require smaller reactors that can be put on space shuttles, satellites that could power them for longer. So we're looking at small scale applications with big impact.
He also shared an unforgettable experience from his academic or entrepreneurial journey.
Right. I mean, lots of things. I feel like every moment has been unforgettable in some sense. But I would say the moment that you're talking about is yet to come. And right now that moment is only a moment in future. So our work every day is to get to that moment and make that moment a reality.
Dr. Shaurya Kaushal then gave a piece of advice to young people who have ideas but don't know how to turn them into reality.
I think one important part that the young generation lacks right now, and I mean, I say young, is wanting to move out of India. And I think that's something that I stood by. Graduating from BITS Pilani, I had the opportunity to do my PhD, Masters anywhere else in the world. I stayed back, and why I stayed back was because there was phenomenal research happening in Jncasr, in engineering mechanics units, where you have faculty who've been experienced for years in one of the best places, right? So when people want to study abroad, they definitely see short-term goals, and I feel like that is a decision where the youngsters can actually think about that decision and explore opportunities in India, not just because it suits them, but also because it suits the country.
In the end, he talked about the significance of his company's logo and name.
Thank you. Just to give an introduction about what a startup essentially means. Startup is nothing but a small company, and that's the first baby steps that a company takes before it begins to grow. And why startup? I think that's a buzzword in India these days, and there is a specific reason for it. Startup essentially is an atmosphere which is filled with drive, which is filled with urgency, and which is filled with the need to prove a point. And that's what the company also embodies. We understand that certain problems need to be answered as soon as possible. That requires a startup atmosphere. If we, across the world, bigger, whatever we've been seeing today, every big company was a startup initially. I would say the government of India has been quite supportive in helping startups, and they understand the essence and the benefits that startup environments get towards the science and technology aspect of the country. And this is not just a local Indian phenomena, but across the world we see that startups have helped science and technology progress much faster. And all of this is on the shoulder of giants. So if you see any piece of technology, there's enough time and effort spent with federal money, federal research by a nation's, that's called nation building. And when nation building reaches a point where technology is mature, that's when startups sprout out. Now these startups essentially help it's almost like standing on the shoulders of giants. So when a technology matures, the technology needs to be commercialized and needs to be used for different applications, and that's what startups essentially end up doing. That was about startups. There's been a lot of initiatives in India under Department of Atomic Energy. There's an institute called Institute for Plasma Research. This is in Gandhinagar. They were one of the first countries. That they made India one of the first countries to have a fusion reactor. The reactor is called Aditya. It started running in 1989, so that's long back. So India has a rich history of plasma research and fusion research, and this is essentially the reactors that India has also been a part of. Another big reactor which Prime Minister Modi just visited today is ITER. It's called ITER. It's the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. It's the largest reactor made by humanity ever, and it's with a collaboration of close to 20 to 30 countries, and India has a large part to play on that. Now this reactor is quite big and quite expensive. So the unique direction that startups also provide is how do we make scalable, cheaper pieces of technology possible. So our direction and how we want to make this happen is not spend billions of dollars, but make something possible with a few million. And we're looking at building a much smaller reactor. This is going to be a small, tight aspect ratio device, and like I said, it's looking at the power of 50 megawatt electric for very specific purposes. Now, what can 50 megawatt electric essentially do? It can power the street lights of India for years. It can charge your phones for years. It can charge small cities in pockets. And of course, I think space travel is another very exciting application to that.
You were listening to Vigyan Ki Awaaz, a podcast on STEM popularization, catalyzed and supported by National Council for Science and Technology Communication, Government of India. Tune in for more such episodes to Vigyan Ki Awaaz on this platform and also through Spotify, YouTube and Apple Music platforms. आइए हम सुने विज्ञान की अनकही